This is Kelly.
And this is Amy.
And you're listening to Diary of a Death Investigator. We are on episode 18, and we're calling it The First 48, after Amy's highlight of being on The First 48.
It was literally a whole 3 seconds, but, you know, that's my claim to fame. So ask me for autographs later.
And don't you know that we screenshot that? We have it. So if you check out our Instagram, it's on there.
You better believe it. Sorry, I'm like hunting a fly in my little area here.
Amy records in her closet. I record in my Harry Potter room. I do think that the sound's gotten better, though.
Yeah, definitely.
I do want to go back to the last episode and talk about our bonus episode from the Green River Killer. So originally, and I said this in the beginning of that episode, it was never supposed to be a full episode. Amy and I wanted to be able to merge part 1 and part 2 together. But I sat for a full 2 days to try to make that happen. And it was too time consuming. I couldn't figure it out. I am not the editing guru. So we were just so we just let Joel manage it. Thanks, Joel. And it turned out the way it did. So it's not perfect. And I just want everybody to know that. It was never supposed to be like this perfect episode. It was basically just to give you guys additional information on what was going on in the case, because I thought the book was really informative. Defending Gary was super informative. So that's what part 2 is about. So for all of you guys listening to part 2 instead of part 1, you are missing out on some really good content because we're watching the downloads and everybody's downloading 2 and not 1 for some reason.
There's a reason why they're numbered.
Yeah, go in order or you're going to lose out on some information.
I don't know. I mean, common
at least
sense.
On that one. Some of the other ones you don't have to.
Common sense.
So speaking of common sense, Amy has a case for us. Go ahead and tell us all about it.
You know, I would say there's not really a whole lot of things here that I'd have to say there was common sense involved. It's a little sad. This is one where it was early in my career, and this actually was not necessarily in my area. That's how I ended up meeting the first 48 people. And I'm going to be real honest with you. I didn't even know the first 48 was a thing until that day. So that was an experience for me as well. I was with my boss that day, and he had to go to our other office, and he wanted me to go with him so I could meet the other doctors and the other investigators at this office as well. So we went to this other office, which is on the other side of the state, and they don't have quite as much of a caseload as we do. They have a much smaller office. So when we were there, they told me that if they got a scene that I could go with them. And one of the investigators, I had actually gone to school with her, and she got, just so happened to get this scene, and it came in as a double homicide. And this particular area around where their office is kind of notorious for homicides. It's not necessarily a great part of the state. So I figured that I had a great story behind it. So I tagged along, and I knew that this investigator was really good at teaching. And so I was eager to learn from her as well. So I hop along in the car with her, and we don't really know much about the backstory on this until we get there. We just know that these decedents are found in a vehicle, and the vehicle is parked in a parking lot of a park. And this is, summertime. It's really hot in this location, so it's really humid. And this is early morning hours that this call comes in. So the vehicle had been found, or technically the call had come in to the police department approximately around 6:30 in the morning. And I think the call came in a little after 8:15. That's around the time that they do morning lineup for the office. So we get there, and of course they have the police crime scene tape up, and it's basically around the whole block. And the park is surrounded by, a neighborhood, and then it's close to a river. And so that's why it's so humid in the summer. There's a lot of foliage and stuff. I always sweat my makeup off there in the summer. So we get there, and then they let us in. We come up under the tape. And then I start seeing these cameras walking towards us, and they come underneath the tape. And I'm like, are you guys going to stop them? And they're like looking at me like I'm crazy. And I'm looking at them like they're crazy. And I'm like, thinking, I thought that it was like media, because media,
Right.
they really have no line. They like to push the limit until they're like little kids. They'll like keep pushing that limit until you give them like a definite line. And so I was like, seriously, like, what are you guys doing? And they looked at me like I was crazy. And I was like, no, I don't know who you guys are. And they're like, oh, it's First 48. And I was like, okay, and I don't know what that is. And they're like, what do you mean you don't know what that is? Like, they're like some stars of some show. And I'm like, I don't know what this is. Like, what the heck is this? Because they don't have this up like where I'm at. And there's like, oh yeah, it's a TV show. And I was like, what the heck? Like, why would you guys allow this? Like, I really don't like, first of all, when like media and news stations are out on scenes. And I think I've mentioned this before, because like, you just feel like there's just now thousands of eyeballs like watching what you're doing on a scene, because they just might catch you like doing one thing like wrong, or saying something wrong, or like, if you just so happen to smile or laugh on a scene, it might just be taken or misconstrued in some different way. And so I'm just like, great, I have to be like extra careful about anything I do, especially because like this isn't even like my area that I work in, and I'm brand new. And so, yeah, that just added an extra little pressure. And so they're like up in your business. Like, you're trying to like...
Did someone formally like introduce themselves to you eventually and say what they are? Did anybody come in and say like, hey, this is who they are, and just so you know, they're going to be watching you? And did you have to sign anything?
No, at the time, I mean, they were just filming. They just filmed everything, and I was just supposed to be okay with it. And then later on, I don't know, like approximately like a year later, when they finally like narrowed everything down for like the episode, then they like basically were like, here, sign this if you're okay with being like in the show. And then they had me sign something. But yeah, at the time, I mean, all the camera people, like, they didn't care. There's like, who's this? And I'm just like, who are you? it was weird. Yeah. And to me, it felt a little unprofessional in a way too, because I'm like, if you're here, I mean, because it's for entertainment purposes, and I'm just trying to do my job, and it kind of made me get a different view of that side of those kinds of shows, because I'm doing like, I'm trying to take pictures and just kind of take an overall, like I had like the notebook and I was like trying to write stuff. It's like someone's like just following you and you're just like pulling your notebook like up to your chest, because it's like, I don't want them getting a shot of what I'm writing down, because technically what we write like cannot be introduced as evidence like into the courtroom, or maybe it can now. It didn't used to. So I'm just kind of like, I don't want you seeing what I write, because it's just what I'm observing. It's not necessarily like what might be put down later as like the cause and manner of death or something. You know, it's just being what is going to be put down like in like the casework later. So yeah, I didn't really like that.
Do the families have to agree to it too? Because I would think that would be, it seems a little insensitive, especially since it's a double homicide. And knowing a little bit about this case, I think it seems even more insensitive, I think, because there were minors involved.
I'm sure depending on the case, for one, but like, I don't think anything in this case necessarily showed like anything of the decedents or like of the children. Like, I don't think it even gave like their names. I think it just said like the ages of the victims. And then
what is the first 48? For those people who don't know what it is, what is?
It's kind of like a 2020. Like, it's just it's a real crime-based show. It's literally just like, here's a real life case. As soon as the officers get a call, it's basically saying that within the first 48 hours is like the most crucial time period for officers to solve a case, because after that time period, it like lessens the chances of them solving a case, like, because that's like your leads can like die off after that. So yeah, it's like the first 48 hours are like really crucial for like solving a case. So like people can remember things differently. Your victim, or not your victims, your suspects can like flee. There's a lot of things, or different factors that can change. But yeah, so you try to solve stuff within the first 48 hours. So that's why it's called that. So new perspective on that show, or basically all those shows that are, because they're just there to get good shots and good footage. So I know that I had said something to one of the detectives that he was like quoting like to the camera, like right away. And I was like, ooh, like, I hope that was right. So, I was like, just like walking away. I'm just going to get back up in the truck. So anyways, yeah, you just have to be really careful what you say, and better be super confident in your knowledge. But yeah, not everyone does the first 48. I think actually they had started recording actually up in our area. And then the captain and chief of the police, they decided against it because of like those kinds of things where it's like those things can actually be shown in court and can actually be harmful like to your cases. So not necessarily always a good thing. I get it's for entertainment purposes, but not great. So back to our story here. We get there to scene. Yeah, I meet the camera people. They're up in your face. There's just a lot of people, and it can make it a little more stressful even because there's just so many people. There's like 3 different detectives on scene. Then you have the cops that are securing the scene. Then you have like your transport driver, and then you have all these camera people. And it's just like, oh my gosh, could you even imagine like all these people that would have to be called to court for this trial alone, like what you've observed, or like if your DNA showed up on the scene? That's just, I don't know. It just seems like so much extra work to like for a show. But the reason why this call even initially came in was a little boy was seen walking down the street in this neighborhood next to this park around 6:30 in the morning, or a little before 6:30 in the morning. And the little boy walks up to one of the homeowners there, and he tells one of the homeowners that he came from a vehicle that was over in the park. He like shows him, and he says the people in the car are dead. So obviously that seemed to be off. And so then this person calls the cops to the scene. So when the cops get there, they see the SUV, obviously. And then little boy, I think he's about 5 years old, they figure out. And then there's a female decedent. She's in the driver's seat. And then there's a male decedent in the front passenger seat. And then there's an infant child that is seated in a seat behind the mother, so behind the driver's seat in a car seat. And so the baby is still alive, though, a 9-month-old baby. So whoever killed these 2 adults left the kids alive at least. But apparently the 5-year-old got out of the car and was just out wandering. Apparently he said he slept on one of the park benches that night, and then just was wandering around in the morning. I think when he saw people out in the morning, he went up to them. So, of course, how much information are you going to get from a 5-year-old child? And obviously, I think that'd be pretty traumatic from a kid as well, just going through that.
Well, it sounds like he was pretty smart because, I mean, he did go and alert people, and he got out of the car. At least, I guess he didn't try taking the baby out, because a 5-year-old holding a baby. But
probably couldn't figure out the seat.
Yeah, and I'm assuming he saw the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I don't know how he couldn't have. So,
Ugh, that's rough.
yeah. And he was probably hot in the car because, yeah, like I said, it was summer and it's really humid. So I'm sure at some point, either the car got turned off or like ran out of gas or who knows? Who knows the situation? Or someone else turned off the car. And so maybe that's why he got out. I don't know. I don't really know all the particulars of it. But yeah, I mean, he was smart enough to go get help at least. So when we're at the scene, when we're looking at these two decedents here, we know that they were both shot, and the passenger that's in the front seat, he ended up being a 26-year-old male. He was shot once in the right temple. And so I specifically remember like telling this detective, and that's what he like had quoted. I said like it was a contact shot. So it was either close contact or contact, which both would be technically correct. Now I know more information through working more scenes, but you can have like a hard contact even, which would cause undermining of the skin.
What's the difference between close contact and then direct contact?
So there's different ranges. So you would have hard contact would be the muzzle of the gun is pressed onto the skin and would definitely leave what we call undermining, where it would push the gases and soot under the skin. And then the gases would then push the skin away from the skull. So you could actually like penetrate with your fingers underneath the skin in the skull. And then, so close contact is technically not muzzle touching, but you would still see soot burns, powder burns, and then actually abrasions from unburned powder. So that you would see a closer range. So it wouldn't be like splayed out so far where you see like a splayed pattern the farther out it gets. So that's going to be closer up to the skin. And then typically if you have something that's a contact with the muzzle, instead of it being pressed up against the skin, you can also have like a muzzle burn. So from the gun, it gets hot enough, it can leave a burn on the skin. Or it's like punching. So it can punch and like leave like a muzzle stamp like on the skin as well. And then like a close range, that can be just like a couple inches away. There again, it's going to leave like a farther spray pattern of like that unburned abrasion pattern from that. So a lot of people call that like a powder burn, which is actually an abrasion. So it's going to just scrape away the skin and kind of scratch away at the skin.
So that guy must have had his window rolled down then, right? Because was there glass anywhere?
Yes. No, that window was rolled down. So the front passenger side window was rolled down. And so that would obviously give him access to like be that close to his head. So he was shot like around the like right temple, like right above his ear. And the female was also shot on the right side head. Now hers wasn't necessarily like contact wound, but it would be like a close range. Now, something that you have to distinguish, which can be kind of hard, is a projectile can also leave like a stretching abrasion on the skin, which can also be very similar to what like maybe a contact wound would leave. So it will leave like this abrasion, or not abrasion, a bruising contusion type pattern that looks like a ring as it's entering the skin, because skin stretches, right? It's elastic. So as it enters the skin, it can cause like a stretching pattern and cause like a contusion to the skin. So you can have like a close range gunshot wound. So thinking that maybe the suspect reached in after shooting the male and like reached across the male and like shot her after. So I think she was shot twice. And then once we had opened the car door where the male decedent was at, there was actually a cartridge case in there. So that would actually fit with thinking that the suspect reached in across over the male, because we know that cartridge casings get ejected up and backward. So it'd have to be inside, like shot inside the car, because otherwise it would have been ejected out behind him.
Right. Okay. And then that means she was shot in the right side of her head also.
Yes. Yeah.
Or I don't know. I just assumed the head, but.
Yeah. And I think I said that she, yeah. So she was shot on the right side as well. So both were shot from that same passenger side. Yeah. And the police were saying like, they call that like an execution style, which I'm like, technically execution style is like from behind the head, like in the back of the head. So I don't know why they called it like executed, because I don't know. That's just my opinion. But
yeah, that's what I always thought it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that just makes it sound worse when you say that, maybe. I don't know. It's like bonus words for TV. So, as I thought, it's like going back and like watching this, it was like a total one. I was like, wow, I look so young. I'm like, wow, it's like memories. So, like,
in my 3 seconds of fame.
Yeah. Well, like, you pause it and you're like, wow. Like, I think it's time. Do we do the Botox or no? I don't know. So looking at all these things, there was other things that were like interesting too. Cause like, these are not really things that like they talked about so much like on the show, because they're just like worried about like solving the cases. It's not so much of like things that they talk so much about like on the scene about the decedents, where it's like CSI type stuff. I specifically remember like in this case, like because the guy like had his arm like on the door, his right arm, and I remember looking at his arm, and in this specific case, I was like, oh my gosh, like his arms had goosebumps still. And I just was very like drawn to that, because I had seen it before, but I'm like, it was just very pronounced on his arms. And so there's a whole science behind it. For people that don't know, like exactly why you get goosebumps, obviously you get goosebumps, like, because it's like to help you insulate, to like keep you warmer, right? But like you also get goosebumps like when you're afraid. So like when you get like an adrenaline rush, like you'll get goosebumps as well. Like you could be like excited, or like it's also like a fight or flight thing as well. But like, of course, like if you're on drugs too, like certain stimulants can like cause these things too. Drugs do everything, of course. We know this.
Right.
So after death, this is a part of like your rigor mortis, because like there's an actual like muscle that causes you to get goosebumps, because it's not something that like we can actually control. It's like something that our bodies just naturally do because of like all these things that are like going on in our body. So like we have this adenosine triphosphate. It depletes, and then the lactate builds up. So like, when you work out and then you get like lactic acid. So this is what happens like in your muscles. And so like it stiffens up, right? So that's like when we get our rigor. So then that's what causes our stiffness. And so part of this is our erector pili. So it's the muscles that stiffens like underneath our skin. And so like basically this is like what's attached to like your hair, like your hair follicle. So that's like what helps it stand up, like, and stiffen, like, So that's why you get goosebumps. And so, like I said, like these can't voluntarily contract. So this actual like whole phenomenon is called cutis ansarina. So there you go. It's like
and not
whole...
the tennis players. It sounds like they're tennis players.
It's a weird term, but it's kind of a weird phenomenon, because like when you look at like people that are dead, you're just kind of like, well, you're not supposed to have goosebumps, because like everyone's like, oh, people that like they still move after death. Like technically no, like you can't, but like this is probably one of those things that people would argue, which it's just a part of your rigor mortis. And it can also be dependent upon like how quickly you go into rigor as well, because I think I've talked about this before, when you have some of those cases where people will like shoot themselves or something, and they go into that accelerated rigor. So I actually asked one of my pathologists today, I was like, could this be like one of those things? And he didn't really give me like a yes or no answer. And I think that's probably one of those things that could probably be studied. Like if it's one of those chemicals, it could probably be studied on like spiders or something. I don't know.
Do spiders get goosebumps?
Well, it's probably with the chemical. So they can use chemicals. They call them zombie spiders, where they like can inject like these spiders to like pick up things and
Oh no. Nope.
where the spider's already dead and they can inject them. So I was thinking not so much as
they're like dead and they're moving.
yeah, there's like actually studies like on this. You haven't seen this?
No,
I don't know. It's pretty cool. So I'm not necessarily thinking about like the hairs necessarily. I'm thinking about like the actual chemical, like of like the movement of like joints.
Oh my gosh. I'm sure there's some sort of like horror movie out there with zombies.
It's science, Kelly. It's actually so cool. Like stuff like that I think is really cool. Like think about like when you're 80 years old and they're like, yeah, we've tested it on like millions of spiders. It's really good. Like it will help you walk again.
I just want you to know that is really cool. But I do want you to know you probably just scared the crap out of Marisa.
Sorry, Marisa, but maybe one day this will help you walk again or like, you know.
A spider you killed in the bathroom, it can come alive again.
Not unless they have this like certain, it's like.
The zombie spider apocalypse is coming.
Okay, yeah, actually, I just looked up because I'm trying to find this, and it says people are so freaked out. Okay, it's Texas scientists have developed veritable spider robots by robotically manipulating dead arachnids so they can grasp objects with their legs.
No.
I think that's cool. Okay, what if you're like paralyzed and that's like the only way you could ever walk again?
Yeah. No, yeah, that's something else. Amy just showed me a picture of it. So maybe we can
up another spider.
Maybe we can post that on our Instagram page so you guys can see it. And we'll pull it if people think it's cool or not cool.
You know how much I like hate spiders. I actually have been very kind to the spiders because my classroom, which some of my students that listen, they know my classroom's overrun with crickets. So I like saved the big spiders. I'm like, go eat them. Yeah. So anyways, yeah, chemicals in your body, they do crazy things, especially when you're dying. Yeah. Sorry that I'm butchering big words. My brain is not functioning on high quality chemicals itself. So yeah. That's one thing that this show doesn't focus so much on. They're basically just focusing on catching, the suspects and getting down to the wire on the 48 hours here. So those were the things that I mostly remember about this case. And it's weird that I specifically remember those things, given that technically this was not my case. This was the other investigator's case. But hey, they quoted me.
I just got a couple of questions about the case. So did they end up catching the person?
Yeah. Well, I was going to finish this off here and tell you. All
right, let's go. I'm ready for the finale.
Oh man. Well, this is it's very much just is not shocking for when you can look up the suspect later and you will see for yourself. So they go back and they look at all these cameras. And of course, around this park, there's like a complex center, like a recreational complex center that has cameras on there. So they're able to watch all this footage. And they just so happen to see all these kids around there that were hanging out at that time. And one of them specifically drove a Mustang. And so they're able to get a hold of this guy that drove this Mustang, and he comes in for questioning. And so they're talking to him, and the guy says, yeah, I just so happened to see someone go up to their vehicle. And then he says, I hear this pop, pop, pop. And he says, I duck down. And then he says, when I kind of peek back up, I see this guy taking off at this end of the block. And so the cops look back on the footage and they're able to break it down slow enough to see this person get into this red Ford Focus that's missing a front bumper. And so they're able to actually find this vehicle or the tags or something. And so they know kind of who this guy is. And he kind of borrows people's cars but they're able to link it back to kind of where he's living at this time. So I think this case was, it was in 2016. So this guy, he literally had just gotten released in 2015. He had been imprisoned between 2006 to 2015, and he had been convicted of assault and battery with deadly weapons. And like, shocking, right? Like, you haven't even been out that long, dude, and you're already doing stuff. And I guess like after that night, he decided to drive up to a different city where he had told one of his friends, like he had admitted to killing these two people. And like something that made it like 10 times worse was the guy that he killed was his supposed best friend that he had been best friends with since he was a kid. Yeah.
Well, so I'm shocked about that, but I'm also shocked about the kid in the Mustang who heard the pop, pop, pop and didn't think, he thought enough to duck, but didn't think enough to call police.
Hey, you know what? Around that area, you just keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
And that's one of those areas because, like, you don't want to be next. And I think that happens a lot in, like, New York and Chicago and those kinds of places because, like, they'll find you. So, especially if it's, like, gang related, you know? So, yeah, he had admitted to, like, one of his friends that he had killed his best friend, and his intentions were totally to rob this guy because from the beginning, we all thought this was just like a drug deal gone bad, which I'm sure that's basically what this was. Cause like all drug deals go down in a park. Like, I mean, come on, you know, It's like, where else do you sell drugs from? You know, it's discreet, it's dark.
Right. Well, and I'm thinking that the guy was probably relaxed because he had his arm up on the window.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, that's your best friend. The last thing you would think would happen is, like, he's going to shoot you, like,
yeah.
And the windows roll down. If it's someone you don't know, like, you're not going to roll down the window for them. So I'm sure the doors were probably unlocked because if the little boy could get out of the car, I mean, I don't know. So, yeah, this guy, and when they bring him in for an interview, they ended up catching him because of course, he's dumb. Everyone calls him in. He tried to be all sneaky and like switch out cars and everything. Well, of course, the police catch him, and then he comes in. His booking photo. He looked like he was trying to be Snoop Dogg. He like had these two braids that were like Pippi Longstocking almost. They were like sticking out in like different directions, and you're like, I don't know which way they're pointing. Like they have
like
mind
you
of
just
their
look
own.
crazy.
Oh, totally. He was like, they were watching film of him when he was like in the interview room by himself, and he's like laying on the floor. He's like, oh man, like I need some food. And he starts rapping, and there's like, oh, he is in a world of his own. And so
was he on drugs?
I'm sure. I think he had some like mental stuff going on.
Oh, well, yeah.
Like they go in to interview him, and they're like, so why like did you keep the kids alive? They're like, do you like kids? He's like, oh man, like I love kids. I can't wait to have one of my own. And they're like, yeah. I'm just like, no, let's not contribute that to society. Then,
did they test the woman? Did you guys test the woman for drugs? Was she on drugs?
I don't know, because that was a other office's case.
Oh.
So, yeah, I mean, he just is like, I'm cold, man. I'm cold. You would have known if I would have done it. Those kids would have been gone too. Like, he was trying to act like he was so hard. Like, I was raised in the streets. I was born this way. I was born and raised to be this way. I was like, okay, dude, like you were caught so fast.
Yeah.
So, and he was also done because he got this other girl involved. Cause like, you know, they like track his phone, like everyone he called, and he called his side girl and like talked to her about this for an hour, and they called her. And then of course she spills her guts. So,
she's like, I didn't do it.
Well, no, but then she ends up like being like, oh, what's it called? Not like conspiracy,
accomplice?
But like accomplice, basically. So like Boom. He gets convicted of 2 counts first-degree murder and sentenced to life. And then boom, she gets like 10 years.
Oh, wow. Because she just didn't call. I mean, I guess I got to brush up on the law, but.
Well, she should have called it in for one. And then she's basically like trying to hide him. So, yep.
That's crazy. It's sad. It's a sad story. I feel bad. I mean, obviously for the kids, that's a horrible thing. And at least he was young enough that hopefully he doesn't remember.
Yeah, well, that's what they were saying. Like the baby, I'm sure, but like 5 years old. I mean, I think that's probably old enough to remember. It could cause other issues. Like there's studies done on kids that things happen to them at 5 years old where like traumatic things can alter your brain. So
I don't remember a lot from 5 years old other than not wanting to ride the bus to school. I think that was it. I don't remember a whole lot. It was a long bus ride.
No, there's some scary kids that rode that bus. So yeah, that was my experience with TV shows. For my 3 seconds of fame, I feel like
here we go. Hands on her. She's about to have this confession moment. Her hands on her chest, like ready to give us.
If they really wanted to know some stuff, maybe first introduce yourself when you barge onto the scene. That technically is nobody's, but ours first because, well, it's the department's, but the bodies belong to the medical examiner.
Right.
So if you're going to be huffing and puffing over my back while I'm trying to do stuff, maybe be a little bit nicer. And like, don't be storming underneath those tapes and be like up in my grill. And then give me more than like my 3 seconds of fame if you're going to be
quoting you.
Yeah. It was me. That was me, dog. That was not him. Like, come on. Like, he doesn't have that. No. I mean, a lot of those guys, they work that stuff for like 20 years. I've seen that guy in conferences that I went to work that scene. And he is a really good detective. He's seen a lot of really bad stuff. So I know that those guys are really knowledgeable. They were saying that one detective that worked on that was like, he'd been in for like 17 years. I'm like, yeah, you see a lot of stuff, especially in that area. There's a lot of homicides.
Well, that's what you said earlier.
Yeah. So it's interesting working with detectives in areas you're not used to. They like to do things their own way, which is not my way. So you just get used to working things in a certain way. So
teamwork.
Yeah.
Teamwork.
Mm-hmm. So
well, that was good, Amy. I haven't seen that episode of First 48. Now I gotta go download. I don't know what it's on. What is is it on A&E?
Yeah, some of them are on Hulu, some of them are on A&E, but like I had to download A&E for like just that. And I was like searching, I was like, oh my gosh, how long ago was this?
long time ago.
Well, they have like 20 something seasons. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know this was this old. So
well, now you know.
Yeah, because if you don't know, then now you know.
So we're going to have to do some research, though, because I did promise that we would have a Where Are They Now episode around episode 20. So Thanksgiving's coming up. You're going to have to come up with some sort of turkey lurkey episode. And then we do need to come up. So if anybody has questions on past episodes that you want some sort of closure on, now's the time to ask us. And you can email us at kelly@diaryofadeathinvestigator.com. You can message us on Instagram.
And we also kind of want to know, who are you when you're listening to so many episodes in certain areas that we're not familiar with? But thank you for listening. But we're just curious.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and you can introduce yourselves on here. Follow us on Instagram. I just thought Amy had a lot of friends in places that I didn't know about. So
maybe I do. I don't know. I'm like, Mamma Mia, you got more stalkers than what we know of, or what?
Yeah,
so.
it's the I'm telling you, it's some sort of mafia crew that she has going on.
Oh gosh, don't say that.
But until next time, guys, thanks, and make sure that you like and subscribe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.